Got it. Okay, good. Well, welcome everybody. This is our annual meeting. I did it as there is a waiting room, so I'm just keeping looking left and right here just to see if people as they arrive are going to be able to join us. Welcome everybody. My name is Matthew Delory. I'm the Municipal Housing Liaison. In a sense, I'm the point of contact with the city for people looking for housing, keeping up and making sure that our plan is moving along, our deed restrictions are in place, etc. And we have a number of other people with us. I'll start in the top left in my screen. I have Joe Burgess here, who's city planner, worked on our fair share plan. Joe, are you also a special master within the?
Yes, I am. I'm special master in about a dozen or so municipalities for different judges.
Excellent. We have Nancy Holm, who is our affordable housing attorney with Serenian, Office of Serenian, and a bunch of other names. And we have Mark Leckington, who's our administrative agent, who is principal at Leckington Advisors. And Mark is the individual amongst a whole host of other tasks, helping people to qualify for units. So this is our annual meeting. It happens every February. We produce an annual report, which you can find on the city website. That will also be presented to council on the 21st as well. This meeting is being recorded so that those that couldn't attend it are going to be able to view it. And again, I'm having more people joining, so pardon my continuing to check to my right here. So what I'd like to do is I am going to share my screen, and hopefully you can tell me if you are able to see the material. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Is it too
Yes.
small or it's good?
That's good.
Okay, great. So just real quick, we're going to do the annual report. I'm just going to pick up some highlights from it. Then we'll talk with our administrative agent a little bit. I'll just review the current balance, and then we'll get into an open discussion. Kind of put it all in one PDF just to make it a little simpler. But as you've seen, this is broken into quarters. And a lot of the beginning of the year was about setting things up. And as we got into the second quarter, there are certain things that I'm going to want to talk about. The first being the Summit Civic Foundation was approached about deed restricting. And actually, if I could go back a minute, there was mention of affordable housing at the last council meeting, and the confusion is that low income housing and what's the difference, et cetera. There are a lot of parties involved in dealing with making housing affordable. The municipality, Summit Housing Authority. So there are a number of entities whose business it is to figure out how do we solve this problem. We're talking about the city's affordable housing plan. So this is our goals versus Summit Housing Authority, which is federal funds funded through the state. Did my screen cut in half, or can people still see that?
You cut it in
No.
half.
It did cut in half, okay. Because I can't look at all your beautiful faces while I'm doing this, unfortunately. But okay, so the Summit Civic Foundation, who's been around for a long time and does amazing work, has housing stock in a sense that allows people to apply to live in their housing. They're a standalone, I believe, 501c3, so they're not related. And we thought, well, if we could deed restrict those, we could get credit for them. And so we thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity. And we did reach out to the Summit Civic Foundation, and we had a great conversation. As you can see in the report, in the end, there's a lot of rigorous standards that have to be met when you're deed restricted. And so they decided they wanted to continue on their mission without deed restricting the units, which we totally respect, but no harm in asking. We have a concept plan for the 2 units on Morris Habitat. And I'm going to scroll down because I actually have the concept plan here. And those are all fun little things we're going to look at in a little bit. This is the concept plan for Ashwood Court. As many of you know, or you may recall, that the city approved and was moving forward with the Morris Habitat complex. This Ashwood Court is a dead end, and originally the plan was that the entrance into the units would be through Ashwood Court. There was litigation. In the end, it was a win-win. The Morris Habitat project is being built. The residents have a dead end. And through that, a lot was created on which 2 affordable units will be built. This is really just a very early concept plan, but there'll be 2 units, off-street parking, um, and there'll be, I believe, 2 bedroom. So those will be 2 additional new units that we'll be bringing online. Right now, we are in the process of putting together an RFP, and then moving forward with how those units will be developed. As we move down our plan, the report here, um, we also engaged Our House. Our House is a provider of developmental disability housing um, throughout the area. They do have houses in Summit. They were not. They
Yeah,
are not. I'm sorry.
Mayor Radis, I think, is trying to join the meeting
I'm
as
sorry.
well.
Yep. Thank you, Greg.
Sure.
Okay. I've admitted her, so she should be in here. Good. And if you could just keep an eye on that, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So Our House, in a sense, these are existing houses. The house, there's a house in town. It was a 3 bedroom that they converted into a 4 bedroom. And we approached them to see if they would be interested in doing any deed restricting of the units in exchange for financing. This is a common practice. The house would provide 4 units of affordable housing. I have a picture of the actual house that we're talking about. This one is on the corner of Greenfield and River. It's a ranch. And in a sense, what we would be proposing potentially, and this is something that we're at the very early stages in, is whether or not they would be interested in putting a deed restriction on the house in exchange for funds from our Affordable Housing Trust. That would then allow the units to count toward our unmet need. So we are in talks with them. We got a lot of calls about emergent housing. There are a lot of people out there who are hurting and need housing. So we did add a number of resources on our city website. That's cityofsummit.org/AH. So if you're interested, we have a number of resources there. The county, a whole host of other nonprofits, state organizations that are providing housing for people. The city's affordable housing plan, unfortunately, is not an emergent solution. So it's not something that you can just sign up on and get housing quickly. However, there are people that have that need. So what we're proud of is that our webpage has become sort of a nice one-stop shop where people can get in and see what their opportunities are within Summit and get on our list, but also be able to apply to other lists and find out resources that might be more specific to a very unique and acute situation for housing. Similar to Our House, I think what you'll see here is that there's a trend in really trying a lot of different programs. It's not just building. We're trying to figure out how do we gain more opportunity in the community to be able to provide housing. So a market to affordable feasibility analysis was done, or is finishing up in a sense, that helps us understand how do you take a market rate unit and supplement income from the trust to make it affordable for a person to buy. Mark may touch on that a little bit later and when we talk about our operating manual. We published with a lot of people's help under Greg Vartan and a number of other people that felt that really an Affordable Housing 101 would be a great document. I happened to talk to Vito Gallo the other day, and compliments to everyone involved. He thought it was a great document that really helped outline kind of some of the definitions and some of the understanding of what affordable housing is, especially from a municipal perspective. And that now lives on the city website. And then shortly after, right simultaneously when that was published, myself, along with the attorney, Nancy, and our administrative agent, presented to the public and had a Q&A about affordable housing and the city's obligation at a council meeting. Morris Habitat is continuing to build, and I have some pictures down here. This is the work site early on in construction. Months later, that same location became this foundation. And then as we continue down, the building went up. Bring this back a little. The building went up. Some more pictures of the building here. And then last week I went to the site again, and those same buildings now are sided. They have some nice stonework on the bottom. And they're humming along. At this point, only one building is up. Here are some of the interior shots. So they've got kitchens and their bathrooms. And because they're modular, they actually went up very quickly. So one building is well on its way, and the second one, they're starting to plan for putting that second building up shortly. As we move down the plan, just some of the highlights. Earlier in the year, Common Council considered a resolution to implore the governor to reinstitute the COA board. There was conversation about that. The council declined to do so. Obviously pursuing less sort of legal related means by which they might understand the state's plans for reinstituting the COA board, which had been considered moribund or defunct. And that led to the litigation that municipalities found themselves in, as there was no unifying state body that would parse out and decide and create standards for our housing. You may have heard recently the zoning board did approve what had started at a 52 unit complex. It got down to 46 units. This is on the corner of Morris and River. That complex, which is 46 units, will deliver 7 new affordable units to our plan. The administrative agent produced an operating manual, which will be available to the public and which we'll be talking about a little bit tonight. But again, hearing council's meeting on the last council meeting on February 7th, there were a number of questions from the public about who the people are that qualify and how do they qualify and how do we find those people. And the operating manual is the detailed instructions on how the city markets available units and qualifies households to live in them. I attended a seminar on housing, and I found they had the National Association of Counties produced what I think is a really fascinating set of materials where you can actually look up on their website by county all of the numbers and how Union County compares to the larger New York, New Jersey area. This is quite a complex chart, but this relates to population growth, et cetera. And there's really a lot of very neat statistics that I think are worth taking a look at. I'm going to put this on the city website shortly, but I thought some of the key findings, especially this bottom one where the vacancy rate is low, and low vacancy rate indicates that the supply is not keeping up with demand. It's obviously not rocket science that we're very behind just in general, not Summit, but really us as a whole on providing affordable housing. But there's a lot of neat statistics in here, a lot of neat policy recommendations. And Joe or Nancy or Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are little to no states that have the rigorous affordable housing laws on the books the way we do. But a lot of states are looking toward New Jersey, and there's a lot of conversation about a lack of housing across the US with regards to affordability. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't already used the link to get to that website and look up some of the activity there. As I had mentioned, we're putting an RFP together for the development of those 2 units on Ashwood Court. And we also explored an accessory apartment program, in a sense, existing housing that might be a carriage house or some offshoot of housing that might become opportunity for housing. There are a lot of reasons why that didn't work, one of which being that there's an enormous amount of structure zoning. There was a lot of issues related to why that is probably not going to work in Summit. But again, really trying to fire on all cylinders and figure out what could we be doing to either deed restrict or get new units built. Just continuing down here, this chart was something that was put together for that 101. As you can see, these are the housing items that have come up that we are starting to count towards 2 simultaneously running goals. The first, this larger goal, this unmet need, as determined by the court, landed at 702. And through, again, you can check the presentation out, a series of putting things on the books, that is now down to 628. And a simultaneous goal within the litigated plan was that the city would develop 50 new units by 2025. And you can see what projects have contributed to that. So Morris Habitat is 12 new units. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you have the 557, 565 Morris Avenue, which are those 7 units, and they will also go toward the 50 unit goal. So right now that is at 25 of 50 units. As we move down the plan here, Mark and I started to just keep track of how many people, now that we had published phone and email and web sign up, how many people are actually calling by month, how many people were signing up by month, and how many people Mark had actually qualified through his process to be in units. And these were some of the totals. As you can see here, it's worthy to note that in web signups, we were in the teens, and we are now much more consistently up in the 20s. Our goal this year will be to put together a bit more marketing materials, a flyer in different languages, etc., that can reach people to say, please do come and sign up on our website. I put the December bank reconciliation in here. This is the last of the month. And so you can see the balance as of the end of 2022 was $1.5+ million. And that is just a very quick rundown of the plan. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Okay. Sorry
Matt,
about that.
Matt,
Yes.
I raised my hand because I just don't want to forget this.
That's okay. Yes.
You said the National Association of Counties is
Yeah.
the one who did that study
I
and
believe so,
shows how Union County, where's that link that we could find that link?
Yep. If you go into the annual report, there's an actual link to the report in the PDF. You can actually just click it and go right from the annual report to that
Thank you.
website. And you'll
Thank
see
you.
the map, and you can just get right in there and look at the county. So I thought that was really interesting. Good. So that's kind of a brief overview of the report. I thought I would have our administrative agent just talk a little bit at the moment. I know he's putting together the operating manual, and I just want to quick share screen the operating manual so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And again, pardon me that I was having technical difficulties before the meeting started. So while I used to have 2 monitors and was all ready to go, that was sort of thwarted by technological difficulty. So my apologies. All right, I'm not sure why I can't. Let's see if I can share that. Don't know why I can't share that, but anyway, I'm going to have that operating manual up on the website. But Mark, if you want to talk a little bit about the operating manual as it discusses affirmative marketing and how we qualify people and et cetera.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As a matter of fact, I think I could share my screen.
Great.
I don't know. How's that work? How's that look? So I'll
Yes.
take you to the top here. So this is good evening, everyone. Again, Mark Leckington with Leckington Advisors. I'm happy to present to you our operating manual. And the operating manual is intended to sort of capture all of the processes and procedures and policies that come into play with affordable housing. Not only does it help with existing units in identifying potential candidates, but in qualifying them for those housing opportunities, but it also looks at an eye towards marketing for new projects as they come online, and then also fleshes out the policies and procedures for a variety of other little ancillary programs like the Market to Affordable program, and things like that. So I'll just briefly go over it and share some of the kind of the highlights. We tried to really make it a user-friendly document to help people really like start at the very beginning. Really, what is affordable housing? Who qualifies for it? And really answer those like sort of basic questions to help people get a strong foundation before kind of diving into the deeper part of the manual. It talks about affordable housing in general across the entire state, and it helps people understand how Summit has Summit's role in the region, the Essex, Morris, Union, Warren region, as well as its role in the overall state, and how the regulations are kind of sort of top down from the state level, and we discuss all that to help people understand the specific kind of rules and regulations that we're working under. Then we go into a section next on.
And Mark, real quick,
Sure.
there is a section in there that talks about the regions and things. At the City of Summit website, you'll have broken down by number of household, the income that you need to make. At the bottom of the city's chart, the income chart, you can actually click onto a much more expanded chart that will show you much more detail about how much people need to be making to qualify for affordable housing.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on, Mark.
yeah, that's a great reminder. We've also got that chart included here, but it's probably a lot more user friendly on the website in that location as well. So then we also go over, the specific income levels, how people can apply for housing, not only within Summit, but other housing opportunities around the state. And some of these things are also appear on the website. Give folks a place where they can follow up on any sort of discriminatory or equal housing rights violations, as well as a little bit of unfortunately it's a call that we get pretty regularly. The most common phone call that I receive is someone saying, I am being forced out of a unit for some reason. Not always people within the City of Summit, and now that I think about it, most of these people are outside of the City of Summit that complain of this, and they're imminently in jeopardy of being homeless. So there are a lot of the referrals that I make to people in those situations are to Central Jersey Legal Services, who are the superheroes in our state on that battle and that war that's going on every day. So again, these links also appear on the city's website, because I feel as you can see, we get a lot of traffic there, and I have a feeling that the lack of phone calls that we're seeing are really a testament to how good the website's been improved with content and links and things. The next section talks about the affirmative marketing process. This is largely a regulatory verbatim kind of discussion about the rules and the requirements of marketing units, making sure that there is a fair chance for everyone across the region to have an opportunity for affordable housing. Then we go into the task of matching people up with units. And this is an area that I think a lot of people, especially if you're a consumer looking for a unit, that you may not give a lot of thought to, because I think a lot of people assume that an affordable unit is affordable and that is it. In reality, there are multiple levels of affordability within the units, and then there's multiple bedroom sizes. So you could be talking about 6 or 9 different groups of units when you break down the 3 different income categories, and then the multiple bedroom sizes within each. So when someone calls up and says, "Hey, how long is it going to be before I get a unit?" It's a very difficult question, because it has everything to do with the units that become vacant and the income and size of that unit, and whether or not they're a candidate for that size and income unit. So I go to some great lengths to explain that. This is all custom text that we've written just for this manual. This is a Summit text, and we talk about the very unique approach that Matt and I developed a few months ago, where we are randomizing our applicant pool every time a unit becomes available. So anyone that has signed up to our applicant pool has just as good a chance as somebody who has been on it for a year or longer. And there's been a couple of cases over the last year where someone has signed up and had a unit offered to them within a month or two of being on the list, which is, I can't say happens very often with other clients that I'm working with. And it's been working very well. So again, this is all our sort of customized approach to random selection.
And if I could just interrupt, I think a lot of
Please.
calls that I would get early on was that the signing up and then being in a long line that took 6 years to get units was daunting and sort of pushed people away. It's a legitimate process by which you sign up and you get in line for a unit. So I'm not saying it's not legitimate, but to have an alternative in which you could sign up and through that process of random selection get a unit is also fairly hopeful as well. So whether you're signing up with the housing authority or with our program or other places, it's a bit more hopeful that people might be able to get housing sooner than later.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's I teach a class at Rutgers, and I've included this new approach that we developed as a best practice for other towns to consider. And we're taking this on the road, Matt. This is going going all over. So yeah, then we talk about the application process. What exactly constitutes an application? This is something that's really helpful for people to understand up front before they even dip their toe in the pond, about collecting pay stubs and income tax returns, and have a full understanding of that the application process is a rigorous system of collecting documents and verifying them, and it's not just simply a pre-application. There's 2 steps to this process, and that's what this next section covers in great detail. All of the ways in which things can be documented, alternatives for those ways, in case there's things that are unobtainable by the applicant, and we go through again all of that in great detail. What constitutes income, what does not. This is all very heavily influenced by the regs, but a lot of this text has been custom written for this policy manual. We also talk about the idea of putting people in housing that they can afford. And this is something that is unique to the state's affordable housing, to New Jersey's affordable housing. If you were to ask anyone how they understand affordable housing to work, most people are going to default to the Section 8 model, which is you will pay what you can afford from your income, and some magical system will cover the balance for your rent. Instead, New Jersey's works very differently. New Jersey prices its units in these 3 income categories, and bases the pricing for these units on kind of fictitious or sample household sizes from within these categories, and then people are tested against the prices of these units, and until people are found to be spending less than these restricted amounts. So for instance, a age-restricted household is allowed to spend up to 40% of their income on housing expense, whereas a normal family rental is the cap is 35%. So we're not only are we testing people for their eligibility, their income eligibility, but we're testing their affordability of the units. Well, the last thing that we want to do is put people into housing that they are unable to afford and are not successful in. So this is something that is really important in the process and worthy of going into great detail about.
And Mark, if you are going to do that, you may not have gotten to this yet, but could you sort of talk us through an example of where you've picked a name out of a hat and you've had to go very deep into the list, and why?
Yeah,
Because the perception is if you got your name pulled, yeah, you got a unit. Oh my
yeah.
God, this is wonderful, but wrong numbers. Can you walk us
Yeah.
through that?
Yeah, I a lot of times when I make that phone call and I tell people that I might have a housing unit that would be a good fit for them, I get a very excited person on the other end of the line. The idea that they could move into Summit is it to a lot of people, I've had people drop the phone and run. I can hear them running around telling people, and like I've had people cry on the phone, and I haven't even told them about the unit yet. So there are people are very invested in in their efforts to move into Summit that I've been talking to. But occasionally a unit does not necessarily fit the lifestyle, I will say, or is not a good fit for everyone. So for instance, I've had two particular units that are opposite ends of the spectrum that I had trouble filling, that are worth telling you about. The most recent one is the example that you would probably envision in your head, and that is a situation where a affordable housing unit was like an older home was adapted into a 2-unit rental. And anytime you do that, if you've ever been in one of these units where a house was turned into 2 units or 3 units, you know that there's always these little compromises that are made, right? There's a kitchen in a space that wasn't, there's at least one kitchen in that building that was not originally intended to be in that place. And because of that, it may compromise the traffic patterns through the unit. You may end up which is the case of the unit that I've been trying to fill, you might end up with a very small bedrooms, for instance. And in this particular unit had 2 bedrooms that were 9 foot by 9 foot. And if you want to paste that out on the floor or measure that out, it's worth doing, because it is very small. And this is actually the conversations I was having with people, is that enough people were declining the units that I started attempting to address it right out of the gate and say, hey, I've heard from other people that these units are small, that these bedrooms are small. I suggest you measure it out in your existing bedroom and put some tape on the floor so you can see ahead of time. I went through 41 applicants. I either spoke to or sent out 41 people before I found a candidate for that unit. It took 3 months. More than a dozen people went out and visited the unit. And it was not until just recently that, as a matter of fact, they're moving in March 15th. It wasn't until just very recently that we found somebody to take that unit. It is an otherwise great place, a great building and a great neighborhood with off-street parking and on-site washer dryer. Ticks all the boxes. It was just a challenge for a lot of people with the bedroom size.
And that also doesn't include where you're calling and the number is incorrect. Somebody's financial situation has changed. They're no longer in the region, et cetera. So I guess I'd always imagine that you pull the name and that person's ready to go, but there are enormous amounts of variables to make sure that that person is appropriate and qualified for that unit. So thank you for sharing that, Mark.
Yeah.
Are there other? Yeah.
There was another quick one. I'll tell you. This is a little bit more interesting, and this is at the Beacon. They had a 1-bedroom. They had a 1-bedroom unit there, which is actually an open floor plan 1-bedroom. So it's a little bit non-traditional. The rent there is $538 for the 1-bedroom unit at the Beacon. And if anybody's been through that building, you know how amazing it is. The market rate unit next door is $5,000 a month. And I had several people not take it because of the open floor plan. They did not like the idea of, they came from a more traditional kind of housing environment or housing setup, and they did not want a unit that was designed that way. Meanwhile, the unit belongs on the cover of an architectural magazine with the way the finishes are done and the tile work in the bathroom. It is an absolutely gorgeous unit. So it was that was a little bit of a challenge too. So it's not necessarily that there are older units that are, there are, as Matt said, there are a lot of variables in this, and there's a lot of people that are just either the unit doesn't work for them in one way or another, or maybe the timing is not right for them in their life to be able to pick up and move quickly. And then, of course, the data could be wrong for someone. They could have, put the wrong figures in there for their income. Or what also happens a lot too is people's bedroom requirements change. So we get a lot of people that have signed up initially, and they've maybe said that they needed a 2-bedroom unit, but when I pulled their name and called them, I find out, oh, they actually need a 3, or maybe now they need a 1 because something in their life has changed and put them into a different category. So in total, I reached out to over 150 people, and I either did not hear from them, or they declined and then there were the 41 of them I actually did have interaction with. So there was a large number of people that didn't even respond. And part of that might have had to do with the fact that I'm sharing a lot of information with them in the initial outreach. I'm telling them about the unit, where it is, when it rents up. And some people are nice enough to get back to me and say it doesn't work for me or the timing's not right, but please keep me on the list. Other people I just never hear from. So yeah, it's not a layup every time. Even with a brand new unit that is modern and gorgeous, it's not always an easy thing to occupy them.
Mark,
Thank you, Mark.
were you able to fill the unit, the 1-bedroom unit at Beacon?
Yeah, that one wasn't as bad as the other unit that I described. With I think I had probably 5 or 6 people through that unit before I found one that would take it. And by the way, the person that ended up taking it, well, I don't want to say anymore. I don't want to give any details about the person's income situation. But let's just say that it was a non-traditional low income person, like meaning that they had they were not the traditional low income person that you would imagine, that they had a slight little tweak in their income. And you would be very happy to hear the details if I share them. I'm just not comfortable because there's not
Much
that many units
appreciated.
there, and yeah, I don't want
Yep.
to share anybody's information.
Anything else in the operating manual? Because I do want to leave room for
Yes.
open discussion and questions. And
Yes, we have a
Thank
couple
you.
sections. We have a couple of programs that we're just rolling out in here as well. There's the Affordability Assistance Program, and this is a program that will help people that are attempting to rent units with security deposits. So this is a situation, just as it sounds. If someone was certified for a unit and was otherwise approved through the process and may need help with a security deposit, this program will be in a position to help them with those costs. Another program that we are attempting to breathe some life into, and this is a down payment and closing cost assistance program. So this will be useful for anybody that is looking to buy an affordable unit. A lot of the units in Summit are rental units. There are a handful of ownership units. And when these units come up for resale, this will be a very good program to help them with closing costs and down payment assistance. And what I like about this is that it will help prevent the scenario that you always hear about, where people are basically emptying their bank accounts to get to closing. And then the very first little bump in the road after ownership is enough to financially destabilize the situation. This is kind of a little insurance policy on their success. So it's a great little program. Big fan of it, and I'm looking forward to the first resale where we can deploy it. The other program that, and this is a little bit different. This is a program that will actually accrue credits if we can be successful with it. And this is a program where we would be, and Matt alluded to it earlier, we would be subsidizing the purchase price of market rate units down to an affordable level. And if I'm sure everybody's doing quick math in their head about what it would take to take a market rate unit and write it down in price. And it's not something that is going to be available for a large percentage of the units, just simply because of the average cost. I think on one of those slides Matt showed us from that county report, I think that I saw a median house price of over $500,000. Those priced units are far out of reach of a program like this. This is a program that would probably target units for sale in the $300,000 range, and it would subsidize the mortgage amount so that the carrying costs of the unit were affordable to the buyer. There's some condos in Summit that we saw on the MLS that would be a good candidate for this program. We're going to keep a little bit closer eye on it, on those units as they pop up and on Zillow and other listings. And we're very hopeful that we're going to be able to create some credits with this program. Sorry about my dog, if you can hear that. And then the rest of the manual, it talks a little bit about the background of how the the different roles and responsibilities of people that are working on the affordable housing. The two main cast members here are Matt and myself, and we discuss who does what. This is very heavily educated by the regulations. Not a lot of deviation here from the regs. We also talk about the role and responsibilities of developers and landlords and things like that. And
Thank
yes.
you. Yeah, no, I think that was good just to get people to come in contact with the kind of material that will be in there, that should somebody want to read that, be able to understand the mechanisms of how we market and how we qualify people and et cetera. So I appreciate you walking us through that. At this time, I'd like to kind of open it up for discussion and questions. If anyone has any.
I just had a quick question
Yeah.
for Mark. This is Dennis White. I'm just curious, how many people have you placed through, like you gave the Beacon example? How many people has the city placed in units in 2022?
Only 4. And then there's a 5th that happened in January. So these are these units are all, aside from the Beacon, all these are re-rentals. These are situations where someone has moved out of a unit and created a vacancy. The Beacon was the only new unit that in that mix.
Great,
And Dennis,
thanks.
on the annual report, that's, those colored boxes of phone inquiry, web sign up, and household qualified. That
Mhm.
column, you'll be able to see
Oh, I see.
how that's totaling and the work he's done in that area.
Okay.
So that's a great question. Thank you.
No, but it's good because I think over the years, there's always concern that when things are re-rented, we weren't picking them up and getting qualified people back into those re-rents. So, I mean, 4, yeah, we wish it was a larger number, but at least they're not, at least the right people are going back into those units when they're up and available for rental again. So,
Yes, being done right. Ellen, you have your hand up.
I do. So I noted that one of the criteria you listed for an applicant is that they list the social security number of all the people in the household. And, I don't have data on this, but anecdotally, I would say the people in our community who are most at risk of homelessness, who are being forced out, who are living in subpar housing, are folks who do not have legal documentation. And you're excluding, I think, the most vulnerable people in our community by requiring that. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if it's what the law is, what the basis is for that.
Yeah, it's really a best practice, and it's not something. And if somebody filled out the application and did not provide it, it would certainly merit a follow-up phone call. It would not be a deal breaker. It is not something that would eliminate them from consideration.
Well, if somebody who doesn't have a social security number isn't going to fill out the application.
Yeah, that's true, but they've already filled out a pre-application at that point. And when I call them for a full application, there's a sort of an open dialogue of conversation going on then. And I describe to them, we have an opportunity to discuss the documents and the things that are required during that phone call, and things like that would come up, I would hope, during that phone call. And I haven't yet run into the situation, so I'm hopeful that we're not excluding them, but maybe it's just a little bit of a maybe it's a hurdle for folks, but
well, Mark,
use
maybe,
it. Sure.
I don't want to take more time here on this, but maybe you and I could have a conversation about how to make the process more welcoming and just accessible to people in our community.
I think Mark is frozen.
I'm back.
Oh,
I
there
think.
you're back. Yes.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'd welcome that, Ellen. I very much look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Lisa?
Yeah, you know what, Ellen prompted a question for me. So if someone doesn't have a social security number, and forgive me, because I don't have a real clear understanding of the process, but would someone have to be able to provide financial statements? Because you kind of have this two system where if someone's getting a paycheck versus they're taking cash. So is there a mechanism kind of built in that, I'm not quite sure how it works.
Yeah, so the threshold for documenting income is 5 consecutive pay stubs, and actually more important than that in the income documentation are 3 months worth of bank account statements, and that is much more of a reliable piece of information, a set of documents to where you can see money arriving in the household. With the
And
advent
that's
of
a standard set by the state.
yeah. Well,
that's-
I actually go a little bit. The state requirements, I think, say 4. I've opted for 5 because I've just from a couple of I see a lot more fluctuation in income that I used to, and the larger data set of the 5th pay stub gives us a slightly more reliable data when you extrapolate it out over a year. And there's some other techniques that I use too to make sure that to double check it when I try to extrapolate the annual income. So yeah, the tax returns are set by the state. The pay stubs are established at 4, but again, I go to 5. And Lisa, in answer to your question, the system is for the renting of a property. This is not an issue whatsoever. Someone without a Social Security card. However, it does get difficult if they don't have a Social Security card to document income. And I haven't run into a situation like that yet. Although I do see a lot of people with Zello and these other cash apps and things like that moving money around, and that sort of gets in that same vein of being difficult to track and understand, like what are these deposits and that are coming into the household.
So those state regulations may make it difficult to be inclusionary to a degree, but it's certainly worthy of a conversation with Ellen of where there may be opportunity.
Yeah, most
So
definitely.
thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Mark. Vernon, you have a question, sir?
Yes, I do. What happens, or what is the impact to Summit if they do not meet their 50 affordable housing unit goal as agreed upon in the Mount Laurel decision?
Nancy, did you want to take that or?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't get to my unmute button there. And if you hear barking, I apologize. My dog enjoys Zoom calls very much. So that's definitely something that has been the subject of conversation in Summit for a while. The issue is going to be, we have to demonstrate to the court that we have done what we promised, and that's going to happen in 2025. And at that point, the judge can say, okay, Summit, you have done substantially a great job given the pandemic, given these situations, given construction costs, et cetera. It can be lenient, or Fair Share Housing Center can say, absolutely not, Summit, you've done it. You haven't done what you were supposed to do, and lean, and argue for the judge to be more harsh to the city. So we have to put our best plan forward. We'll just put it that way. I mean, there are things that get in the way. Like I said, the pandemic, construction costs, there's been a slowdown in certain types of development, things like that. So, but we're trying our best to get that number accomplished. I hope I answered that question. If you have a follow-up, please let me know.
No, but I do have just a quick second question, and that is, if there is a homeowner who is interested in trying to place their, a unit or so in their home, in their current dwelling, how do they know how to get in touch with you?
To sell their unit to the city, you mean?
No. I mean, it wasn't necessarily for you, but but
okay.
For the housing guys, that if a homeowner wanted to avail a unit in their current dwelling, as you say, a carriage house or what have you, how would they get in touch with you to say that, hey, I wanted to see, can I do this?
Yeah, the cityofsummit.org/AH has Mark's number, email address. AH@cityofsummit.org is the affordable housing email. It's a very general email. There's phone numbers for he and I. So anyone that would be interested in potentially participating in that would be welcome. Thank you.
I have Dennis and Harry, I have a question for Nancy. The goal by 2025 is 50 units.
Yes.
And let's say everything creatively has been done. We've done a lot of marketing. We've done what we consider giving our best efforts to reach that goal. And we go before the judge, then the goal isn't reached. There's nothing that can be done. We're not going to be able to create units, overnight or what have you. But wouldn't there be the judge would then issue something like a financial penalty to a city who hasn't achieved that goal of fair share housing would, as you mentioned earlier, maybe be a little more stringent in terms of instead of 50 and in the next 5 years, they up it to or whatever, or they may come back and say, well, based upon your situation, maybe 50 was not a realistic goal, whatever. But when this hasn't met, I mean, it's a goal, and if it isn't met, what is is there a penalty for not meeting it? I mean, that's my question, I guess. Monetary penalty. What other penalties are there?
There wouldn't be a monetary penalty necessarily. It would be more of if the court decided to take and I would say it would be an extreme measure given how well the city is doing in that meeting that 50 unit goal. It would be more of the court would either compel the city to build in a certain place by a certain time. There's a whole lot of things that could happen. It's hard to say because we don't know if the COA board will be reestablished. There's a lawsuit out there right now that could change everything, and we may not be in front of the courts anymore. We may be back in front of COA. So it's I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you, but it's hard to say exactly what would happen in the extreme circumstance of, and this is certainly not Summit, where a municipality is thumbing their nose at their affordable housing obligation. The most extreme response would be a judge, there's at least one in the state that has done so far and has basically had the court master take over the planning board and ensure that affordable housing is built. That is a very extreme case, and Summit is nowhere near that extreme. So it would probably be some sort of settlement. We'd have to work with Fair Share to build those units. Is most likely.
Renegotiate. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have Norm. You were going to ask something, and then Susan.
Yes, when a builder is required to set aside some affordable units, are there any requirements on those units as to how they compare with the other units, or what size they are, or how many bedrooms, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, there's requirements. The biggest one being the bedroom mix. There's some very stringent rules about that prevent the developer from making them all one bedrooms, which would be sort of like financially. There'd be a financial incentive to do that because as you reduce the square footage of affordable units, you theoretically move the pie chart slides over to the market rate side. So if you could do all one bedrooms, they would greatly do it. And I'm sure there are a lot of towns that would very much love to do all one bedrooms too, to prevent children from entering the school district. So there's a requirement of there's a maximum amount of one bedrooms. There's a minimum amount of 3 bedrooms, and then there's an allowable sort of in the middle is of the 2 bedrooms. That's where a lot of them where the remainder go. So it's a pretty good mix across the board for the bedroom size, for the bedroom configurations. As far as the size of the units goes, the regulations are silent there, and they rely on the local jurisdiction and the planning board process to educate the developer on those issues. but the regs are silent on the specific square footages of the units or the square footages of the bedrooms. There is one other regulation that requires the developer to use the same heating and cooling systems in the market rate units as the affordable units, so that they're not, putting in this high efficiency modern furnace in one and then electric baseboard in the other one. They're allowed some. There's no requirement on the fit and finish of the units to be the same, so you could put some fancy teak wood, things in the market rate units, and then like carpet floors in the affordable units. So there's flexibility there and an opportunity for the developer to save some money. But some of the developers I've talked to have opted to put in the same finishes and the same materials in all the units simply because of the construction logistics that are created by having a different countertop for, say, one unit. They've got to store that unit, that countertop separately, make sure it gets, organized and put in a way that, and then you've got, different floor finishes. Some of them actually prefer to have them all identical so that the same crew can just go in and knock out all the units without having variations.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank
Norm,
you.
was that? Thank you. Excellent. We'll go Susan, Robin, and then Lisa.
Oh, so Mark, that was fantastic to hear that the quality is always, for the most part, going to be the same across the board. That's awesome. And I, because I'm as a council person dealing with the practical phone calls of, God, how did somebody who's been on the waiting list for so long doesn't get on the list? I wanted to understand how often you do the refresh to randomize it, is one question. Is that a quick one you can answer? Is it every 6 months?
Every time a unit becomes available, we re-randomize the list. So if there's 2 units, I'll randomize it for the first unit, and then I'll randomize it again for the second unit. So, it's not done once or twice a year. It's every time a unit becomes available. So if you signed up yesterday and a unit becomes available tomorrow, you're in the mix.
So, but if you can give me a time frame, because what I am advising anybody who calls me up,
Mhm.
I'm saying check your status on the list, find out what number you are. And I thought it was maybe every 3 to 6 months it was getting refreshed. And so how often does a unit become available?
Yeah, last year it was only 4 units last year of the portfolio. So it's completely random. I might get a unit tomorrow. I might not get another one for 6 months, a vacant unit.
So then my estimate of 3 to 6 months is fine, is to tell folks, go back and look, make sure all your data is correct. And so it did shock me that only 5 people had been placed. And so our rubric of success of making sure that we have stock available is one goal. And are you including, when the developer has 7 houses, 7 slots available, if they fill them, is that number not counted in? Is that a separate calculation?
No, they're all the total number of units that we that figure that I gave you earlier are all the units that were available during 2022. So it's inclusive of everything. The developers are relying on me to provide certified tenants for them. There's no developer that is working and maintains their own list or their own certification process. This is all done through a single process here in Summit.
Okay, thank you. So I know fundamentally we are doing above and beyond to make sure we're doing everything right. And still there is this unbelievable crises, not just in Summit, not just in Union County, not just in New Jersey, across the country. And developers are, you can just look and seeing how the housing stock is going up and it's being priced through the roof. And what is not this body's responsibility, but what legislation, what can be done is not for this body, I know, but it is just the most worst situation that we're dealing with. And I thought we had a good story to tell. And I think you're saying, yes, we do, with all the handcuffs on us, but it is shocking. Only 5 people got placed.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I
But
think your
just
question too, Susan,
opining.
I think your question though does really get to the heart of the mission of the municipal operation in affordable housing. Where can you develop units, and then how do you qualify people appropriately? And then where are you rehabbing existing? So what stock do you have? How can you add to that stock? How do you clean up and keep the stock you have well run? And how do you make sure the right people are getting into that? That's the machine that was built that we feel like we're really getting in on. It's just there are tons of variables that reduce the ability to quickly deliver units. That has been the struggle. But it's
Susan,
a good reason.
Susan, if you ever hear from anybody that would like to know more about like some details about where they are on the list and where they have been in each random selection, I keep them all. I have meticulous notes each time, and I can tell them, you know, when they were picked, you know, why that unit may or may not have been a good fit for them, you know, given the information I have on them. Very happy to talk to anybody that and help them sort of understand that.
Thank you, Robin. Susan, you're good. I'm going to move on to Robin. Thank you, Robin, and then Lisa.
So apologies if this was shared in the first portion of the presentation, but do you have a projection for where we will be in 2025 toward that 50?
The community has been talking about a lot of options, if you may recall. No, we don't have a projection. There are a lot of things happening within the city. I mean, in a sense, the plan set in place ordinances and capture mechanisms so that as development happens, those units get pushed into the city's count. But no, we're not able to really project. I could guess, but it would be anecdotal and probably irresponsible of me to do so. Lisa, thank you, Robin.
Actually, Reverend Harrield made me think of this question. I have 3 quick questions. First one for Nancy. Reverend Harrield asked about the 50 number. If we don't get to the 50 number, you know, kind of what would happen. But do you see that Fair Share would take into account that we took our larger number, the 702, down to 628? I think it shows in good faith that we're even though it doesn't meet the 50 number, we're still working in good faith. Do you think they'll take that into account?
Absolutely. I think the most important person to convince, let's say that COA doesn't get reestablished, we're back in front of the courts in 2025. We have to show the new court master and the judge what we've done. And I think Summit has a great report card to show. I mean, we don't have the vacant land, and I'm trying not to put anybody to sleep either by going into the weeds on affordable housing. But I mean, Summit, as everybody knows who lives in Summit, there's not a whole lot of land to say, hey, let's take these 20 acres over here and build, and get a whole bunch of units. We don't have that ability. We don't have the luxury of vacant land. So I think Summit has done an excellent job with what they've put together to capture units. I think, whatever becomes of Broad Street West will definitely chip away at that number. The 7 units we received from the newest one is a great step in the right direction. So I think we have a good story to tell, and we're going to do our best to get to that number as close as we can. So
That's great. Okay. And then the second question, I guess it would be for you, Matt. I know the Housing Authority is separate from affordable housing, but we know that Glenwood, Weaver, and Chestnut are all going to go under construction. And most likely, even though Chestnut obviously doesn't count towards our numbers because they have residency preference, when Weaver and Glenwood potentially get reconstructed, I'm sure there'll be more housing there. So I was curious, would those go towards our core number of 50? And why not? It's helpful to understand that distinction. I know probably not, but I just would like to hear from you then.
Well, and Nancy may be the answer to this, but my understanding is that they have a policy that allows for the selection of preference by geography. And I think if that policy is continuing, then it instantly negates any unit that they contained in their portfolio. Is that right, Nancy?
Yes, if they, so what's existing there, let's say they add another 10 units onto each building. So we get another 20 units for each space. If they would forego the residency preference on those 10 new units, we could count those toward our 50. The problem is going to be the residency preference. So it's not required. The residency preference is not required by HUD regulations, but it's allowed. So, and it's not allowed in Mount Laurel, which is frustrating because they are affordable units. So,
do you know if most housing authorities have residency preferences? You may not know that landscape, but is that common?
It's very common, just because it's allowed under HUD regs. So they follow the HUD regs and allow that. And usually where there's a housing authority, there is just to cross over language, indigenous need within that municipality for affordable units, which is why they have a residency preference in the first place. They're building those housing units to serve that population. So that's the policy. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but that's kind of the overarching policy for housing authority units. So
yeah, that's absolutely correct. And it used to be an allowable way to market the state's affordable housing units, or at least there were towns that attempted to do it by sort of limiting the population of people to residents in the community. But when you think about it, as the market rate units become more and more expensive, your pool of low and moderate income people in the town is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. It's eventually only going to be limited to the people that are in existing affordable housing or are in some sort of non-conventional, housing situation. They're, staying with a friend or something along those lines. So I'd like to think that this policy at the Housing Authority may be revisited at some point, and especially with the benefit of creating so many creditworthy units. I would hope that maybe that's a discussion that could be had.
Matt, maybe I can jump in since I'm on the housing board.
Sure, Dennis, and then the mayor, and then Lisa had one more question.
Yeah, just to clarify, all of the Glenwood and Weaver do have a resident preference too, not just Chestnut. All three developments do. And as far as the redevelopment that's under consideration, we're just in the very, very early stages of that. And it could be just a renovation of existing units. It could be an addition of new units, which is very complex to add new units for all kinds of reasons. But on the resident preference, as we do recapitalize, there are some requirements in some of the capital instruments we're looking at, like tax credits, that you remove the resident requirement in order to do a tax credit project. So there's a lot of moving pieces right now on all of this. And so kind of stay tuned as we go through this process of talking to developers for the Housing Authority, what can be done and what can't be done. We hope we can, but it's a lot going on. And maybe I'll just throw in real quick, because there are a few people on the call, we have a Affordable Housing Corporation that we've started recently. It had been dormant, but we re-energized it. We have a board meeting next week. It's the Summit Affordable Housing Corporation. And, it was created to do development in the city. It's never really got it off the ground for many, many reasons. Again, how difficult it is. But we're hoping to get that back up and running. and to collaborate with the Housing Authority on some potential, redevelopment, with and without the Housing Authority around town. But, it's an uphill battle, but we're hoping to do that. So both Reverend Harriel and Norm Miller are on that board of the Summit Affordable Housing Corporation. So just thought
Thank
I'd
you
add
very
that
much,
to this
Dennis.
group.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mayor, hi. And you're on mute, Mayor.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Matt and Mark for all the hard work you've done. The Affordable Housing Commission and the authority in Summit is in, I think, better shape than it's been in a really long time. And that's largely to your efforts, Matt, and yours as well, Mark. And I really, really appreciate that. I'm also really so glad to see so many people at this meeting tonight. So that said, to your point, Mark, I must say about the residency requirement, I've had conversations for over 7 years with many, many residents of Summit who feel very strongly that, particularly in terms of the Gallo building, that men and women who have raised their families in this community, who have put years of dedication into this community, should be given preference to the Gallo building. So to living in their own community where their families are living. I would not personally be in favor of getting rid of the residency requirement. That said, I understand what Susan is saying, and I agree. It's difficult to understand that we are only replacing 5 people with, in housing. That's hard, but we're doing a lot, I think. I'm happy about Habitat. I'm happy about the 7 units that are coming into play on Morris Avenue. My fond hope is that we get, I won't say how many, a number of units on Broad Street West. We need to do our best for this community. But it's just not easy. And we are a almost fully built out community. So it's not like we're in Chatham or Chatham Township where they've got tons of open land and they can throw up a structure with 300 units. We don't have that opportunity. But so we should take advantage of every single tiny thing. And I think in the past, we have not done a terrific job at finding the small little opportunities to do things. We have not made it easy for people to understand how they can apply for housing. And the things that you've done, Matt and Mark, are really important. I know it seems like it's not like we've got 30 units out for somebody out there, or for folks out there, but just opening it up and making people who want to live here feel welcome is important. So anyway, I am opposed to getting rid of the residency requirement. But I'm also very grateful to Matt and Mark and everybody who's on the Housing Authority. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mayor. Can I just jump in for a sec, just because I think it's a much longer conversation than for tonight. But I'll also add my thanks to Matt and Mark. But Dennis, can you just, if you have the number, can you just give a rough idea of how many Summit residents are currently on the waiting list for the Housing Authority?
Yeah, for the family units, I think we closed the list this year. I think it was 1,300. I think it was 10 years. And so we decided to close the list because it just was, it's not great to close a list. And I'm not sure on the senior building, but we usually say 2 to 3 years because that turns over much more. And just to clarify, I mean, Susan, you mentioned the 5 units. The Housing Authority has placed many, many more people than that during the course of last year, just through normal, especially again in the senior building. Roz Condellan is on too. I don't recall how many people. I mean, it's not a huge number, but there are people getting placed into those, Glenwood, Weaver, and Chestnut. So, but the waiting list is very, very, very long. So that's why we closed it. We're going to deal with it in a different way at some point in the future, so.
You know, Dennis, from our meetings, I think that we could say at least 3 to 5 people a month, you know,
Yeah.
because of the turnover in the senior building and the family housing.
Thanks,
So,
Rob.
I mean, we could be proud of that we refurbish the units quickly and we get onto the waiting list and we place people.
Thank you, Roz. Thank you, Dennis. I want to make sure we get back to Lisa's question, but I think that was helpful for the purpose of this discussion and the people here to just know how many we're talking about. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Roz. I appreciate that. Thank you, Dennis, as well.
Excellent. And I know we're nearing the 7:30 hour. If you have to go, this will continue to be recorded. We're available for any questions or that you have or people that have questions. So we'd be happy to entertain those as well. But if you have to step off, we understand. Lisa, and then the Reverend's holding a pen up.
Yep, just a quick question. I want to thank everybody, and we'll have more discussion at the next council meeting. So really quickly, I just was curious, the tax that is charged that goes into the Affordable Housing Fund. Could you just briefly touch base on how that works?
Yeah, so if you're not producing units and you're developing in town, there's a residential and a non-residential fee that's owed. In a sense, if you're creating a new unit in town, knocking down and building a new house, you owe a fee. If you're a commercial entity and you're increasing volume, you're adding space to commercial, you are then going to owe a fee. The non-residential fee, which is the commercial piece, is state. It's set by the state. The form is by the state. And then locally, our ordinance is the development fee for residential. So those are the two. You're either owing units where you owe a fee if you're developing in the city, and there's 5 or 6 exemptions, nonprofit, and there's a little list of them. That's a quick down and dirty. It's a little more complicated, but it's your units or fees. And just so everyone knows, $1.4 million came out of that trust for Morse Habitat. And when we're talking about our house, could we use those funds to incentivize deed restriction? And so that's where all that money is being used to put new units on the books, et cetera. Was that it, Lisa? You're all set?
All set.
Okay,
Thanks.
excellent. Yes. Any other questions? Yes, Reverend.
Yes, I just want to make a comment. First of all, again, with what Mayor Rader said, kudos to you and Mark for what you've been doing that has gotten us to this place, to this point. But I would like to say that I don't hear much talk about something that has been accomplished in Summit compared to across the state. And by that, I mean accentuating the positive. And I do very, very much recall when this process of negotiation started with Fair Share Housing. And I think we need to really point out to residents and other persons that the mayor and our city administrator and whoever else was a part of the negotiating team with Fair Share Housing did a tremendous job, an excellent job, in light of the fact, knowing how aggressive Fair Share Housing was and has been and continues to be. They could have easily said your goal for 2025 is 100 units or 200 units or whatever number they came up with, notwithstanding the fact that Summit doesn't have a lot of open space and is very much landlocked, but they accepted 50, which is a goal. But my point is that we have to be as creative and do everything that we can, because there was nothing that would have stopped them arbitrarily or whatever from saying your goal is 100 or your goal is 200 based upon the unmet need of 702, which has been brought down, I think, to what, about 628. But so I think we need to accentuate the positive and say 50 is considering the climate that we're in at the time. The judge, I think that was Judge Kenny, and if I remember his name, he's now working for the state, Walsh, Kevin Walsh, and some others. I think we're the cities to be, whoever negotiated for the cities to be commended, and we should point that out, that 50 there was nothing, again, I emphasize, there was nothing that would have stopped the judge from saying 100 or a Wash from saying 50 is not acceptable. We want more. And they don't have to even look at whether you're landlocked or not. So I think we need to accentuate the positive and say 50, which incentivizes us to do our level best to reach that goal. That's all I have to say.
Yes,
I'm
thank
just
you.
going to
And-
jump in here
Yes, ma'am.
and Reverend, the first meeting I had as mayor at my office hours was with you. And that's fitting because you gave the blessing at my swearing in. And we talked about this exact thing. And you said, we cannot go to court over this. You've got to do something, Mayor. And I said, well, we're not going to go to court over this. We're going to do what we can. And Michael and I spoke a lot about it. At the time, we spoke with Councilman Rubino and McTurnan and Councilman Naidu and Sun. It was a bipartisan agreement among council who really didn't like having to settle, because we feel in Summit we've been doing a good job for many years compared to all of our surrounding communities. We've been trying our best to build housing, affordable housing, but it was imperative that we make this and we do the best, get the best deal we could. Michael was the main negotiator with the attorneys and with Fair Share Housing. And you're right, Fair Share Housing they didn't care at all. In fact, for anyone who doesn't know, what they were doing aerial maps. And a quick side, Springfield, which is where Baltusrol is located. Fair Share Housing was coming after Springfield to have them build affordable housing on the Baltusrol golf course, which just shows the lack of understanding about a community. And we will do everything we can. But they pushed us hard. They pushed us hard they said, you don't have to build anything in Summit if you make the Gallo building, the senior building, if you don't make it residency restricted. And we said no. We could have had a zero number, but we felt so strongly that the people who've raised their families here should be able to live here, and that shouldn't count. And that was a unanimous decision among the council members at the time. And I'm really proud of the decision they made. We had a lot of support. Thank you, Reverend, from you and from Vito Gallo, and many others in the community. But we're making our best efforts. And you're right. We should tout that. We shouldn't hide behind it. We should just say, this is what we've done and we're doing it good. Look at what they're having to do in Chatham and Milburn and Springfield. It's crazy. But that's because many of the communities around us didn't choose to build affordable housing for decades. And now they're in a spot. So anyway, sorry, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to give me the opportunity to say thank you.
I love it. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, and just I know we have Joe Burgess here. I know he was heavily involved, and Administrator Rogers and council. And I would say that even as an employee who's working on behalf, that we may not know what will happen in 2025, but we will be able to authentically walk into any courtroom and be very proud of everything we are doing now. And that's to everyone. And I also want to lift up Nancy Holmes, who, my God, who really has sometimes saved us from all sorts of weird things from happening. She's a great counsel. So we really appreciate you, Nancy, as well. So we're nearing the 7:30 hour. I don't want to cut people off with questions, but you can field them anytime you'd like. This was a great meeting. The annual report will go before council on the 21st, which is their second meeting in February. And like I said, we're very available. So if anyone you know has questions or et cetera, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I will put this recording online tomorrow so that those who couldn't attend can watch it. All right. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks again for everything.
Thanks,
Be well.
everybody.
Thanks,
Take care.
Matt. Everyone.
Thank you, Nancy.
Susan, I'll
Take care.
catch up with you and Lisa in the next day or two. I know we wanted to meet afterwards, but I'll give you a call or we'll email and set up a time to speak this week. Is that okay?
Yep.
Super. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.